Hmm. No, don't give up your day job. Maybe this time, maybe another time. But this is Skinny E Media speaking here with our usual Bobatron, Rob Bannister,
Hey, hey.
and we're going to be doing a bit of a remix. But this time it'll be on racism. Some of the podcasts I've done by myself, without anyone else. So I thought, let's get back to where we started, and this time get another voice to contribute. And here we have Rob.
Hey, hey. I'm glad to be here. Thanks for having me on.
Hey, no worries there. I just wanted to let you know I finally got your books in good time. I know it's a bit off topic, but Evil Busters Chronicles, I'll be more than interested to see how you do your little satire in your writing.
Yeah, well, bearing in mind they are quite old. I mean, the very first episode I wrote, end of 2006, early 2007. So, I mean, yeah, it was a lot younger me who wrote it, and I might be some rather outdated stuff in it. But that's neither here nor there. I hope you enjoy them.
Absolutely there. I mean, aren't we all guilty of liking outdated stuff? Because we will be talking, at least in this podcast, about Little Britain, Mighty Boosh, Peep Show, Soul Man, Song of the South, and quite a few others. I mean, racism is a very thorny topic. It always has been.
For good
Um,
reason.
Even if one person may say, "Oh, we need more union and workers' rights," or "I support LGBT," when you start talking about immigrants or certain groups, oh, they switch their tune quite fast. And with that in mind, as usual, what was your experience with films or just anything in general dealing with the R word?
Um, well, I mean, we were taught quite a well, we taught a lot about racism at school and growing up, and we taught like obviously that it was bad and why it was bad and everything. I don't think they give us quite the insight into how it works and everything, but it was but no, it gives an idea. I remember some of my friends, I say friends, acquaintances in school, just flat out being racist and everything, and just unashamedly. I don't know if they still hold those opinions now. I think a lot of them don't. But yeah, they would just throw around racial slurs and everything. And of course, I was like, dude, that ain't cool. So I mean, yeah, early. I suppose I don't know how many films or TV shows that dealt explicitly with racism I saw when I was a kid, because most of the most of the stuff that typically deals with racism is aimed at more mature and older audiences. You look at most films that are tackling racism, they generally don't have the lower age ratings. I mean, I suppose I did watch Fresh Prince of. Mind you, even though even then I was probably in my teens when I watched Fresh Prince of Bel-Air, because I was watching reruns of it. I'm always reminded of that episode where they get pulled over, and of course Carlton just thinks it's all perfectly kosher and everything, perfectly cushy, and it's just the police doing their jobs and everything, and Will just had to tell him, no, this is the police racially profiling people, because if you see a black guy driving anything but a clapped out old banger, you pull him over because you just know he stole it. And then, of course, Carlton then goes and asks Uncle Phil, "Hey, Dad, if you saw a car driving too slow, you would have pulled it over?" To which he replies, "I asked myself that question the first time I was stopped." So, I mean, yeah, I mean, that's what that's one foray into it. But of course, in the end, I didn't see that episode until I was a bit older, and of course, I've yeah. So I can't remember my first foray into explicitly experience with things that tackled racism or things that were racist. Although a lot of things we grew up watching were more racist than we even realized. Dumbo, uh, or just any old school uh, Walt Disney stuff, and the Looney Tunes and stuff, old stuff. You just see the stereotypes that they have of certain demographics. It's just cringeworthy. I'm kind of rambling a bit, so Yeah, I might actually throw this back to you, Mark, because as I'm sure most people might be aware, but might not, Mark's got a slightly bigger dog in this fight than I have. Whereas you can tell by my profile picture, I am as white as Rush Limbaugh, rotten piss, and whereas Mark is you're a mixed race, if not mistaken, Mark.
That is correct. I try not to be too specific about it, but for anyone who is curious and does want to hire me, give me a loan, or date me, I am 60% European white with Germanic and English Anglo stock.
I don't think the genealogy of it really makes much odds, Mark. It's what they see on the outside.
I'm afraid so there, but like you said, yes, I've had a lot of insecurities about what I am ever since I was called Al Qaeda and Paki and Nick Nog and several other slurs every now and again. It was not pleasant, although the one that really got me by my nerves was me calling me an American idiot. So, growing up, I was more targeted based on my nationality as a partly American than I was by my race.
Yeah,
Go
but
figure.
you don't have an American accent unless you had one when you were younger and everything. And as far as I'm concerned, being American or being British is just your accent. If you sound British, you're British. If you sound like a Seppo, you're a Seppo.
Well, the problem was is my mother. She's sounds a lot more like that.
Yeah.
Um, and I think also because she's the one in the family that's not white, looking one bit, even though she does have Welsh ancestry. But that's another story. I was always a sort of target based on that because dark-skinned American lady. A very easy target when you're in Britain. Always like trying to say, "Oh, did you know about certain gangs or this or that? Oh, I bet you eat fried chicken and watermelon." I'm like, shut up. I didn't pick up on a lot of these sort of stereotypes until, like you, I got older. I know a lot of films that deal with racism can also be a PG or U certificate, like Driving Miss Daisy or
And
Beaufort.
Hidden Figures.
Oh yes. Well, that came out when I was in my adult years, but had I grew up, I very likely I probably would have seen that. So you are right. But it was actually Roots, the mini-series of all things that came into my awareness of these horrible issues. I never heard the N-word, or at least I didn't pick up on it until that particular mini-series. And we saw it in school. Must have been in like year 9, and it was one of the most disturbing things I saw at that point. And I know I go on about how Da Vinci Code and Elfin Lee fucked me over, but Roots was a special kind of uncomfortable. Although it was sanctioned because it was in a school environment, but worst of all, it was PG, and it's got rape, it's got use of the N-word, it's got torture, mutilation, and a lot of really strong material for what is essentially a mini-series about enslavement and antebellum South. It was not a pleasant watch, and I had unpleasant
Wasn't it?
conversations with my mother about it.
Wasn't that by design? I
Of
mean, wasn't it
course.
deliberately done that way to make you realize just how horrible that time and that environment and that society was? I mean, if it didn't make you unsettle you, it probably wasn't getting its point across. To be honest.
Well, that's not what I have the problem with. It's just the rating wise. It certainly threw me off because you would expect that sort of material to appear at least in a 15 or maybe like a 12. 12 Years a Slave and Roots aren't that different from one another, although I do think 12 Years a Slave there's maybe a little bit more blood and prolonged torture. I think
Probably why it is a 15. But as I've mentioned on many other podcasts, if the violence or the content is justified by context, like it's done there to get a point across rather than just be for entertainment value, they will come down more leniently on the the material.
Oh, of course. I mean, on some level, I call it the Saving Private Ryan clause. If
Yeah,
there's a sort of a historical, perhaps educational context behind what's going on, chances are they'll be a bit more relaxed about it. It's why you see a lot of war movies tend to get lower ratings than regular horror and action movies that might have just as much violence. Although that can vary based on the mileage. I mean, Waltz Bashir was a war movie and that got an 18. And,
Not seen it, don't know.
well, take my word for it. It's a great movie, but that's more. It is racism because it deals with Israeli soldiers killing Palestinians and Arabs, so that could count. But when people think of racist cinema, they always think of African Americans, black people. That's
Well, it's
usually the default sort of depiction.
Well, it's because it's Americans that are making the movies, and of course, the most obvious experience that Americans have with racism. I mean, with the or their most their most form of racism they're most familiar with will be the treatment of the African American population throughout their history. First with the slavery, and then with the Jim Crow for the next 100 years afterwards. So well, I mean, obviously that was what people tend to think about. Obviously, you've got the treatment of Native Americans as well, and probably I'd say to a lesser extent. I don't want to say that because it might diminish it, but not quite as probably at the forefront of the mind would be the treatment of East Asians who have come there in the late 19th century, who, whilst not enslaved because slavery abolished, they were pretty much treated for almost like second-class citizens, or just treated like shit by the white Americans. But obviously, I mean, obviously any demographic now that isn't fit under the definition of white, which throughout its history has shifted meaning so many times, because again, it was all just some made-up bullshit and in the colonial period to justify racism. Have all got shit. I mean, we could easily go into talk about South Asians and their treatment, especially in the 21st century post 9/11, or Middle Easterners.
Oh yes, I mean it sort of runs the gamut, really. I mean, when we were talking about war movies, we sort of compartmentalized it based on period. We can talk about individual groups themselves, and you are right to some extent. They don't always talk about some of the other people's experiences, but now lately I've been seeing maybe a little bit more films based on sort of East Asian experiences as well as Latin American or Hispanic experiences. There was a film that came out a few years ago called Desierto, which was a 15, maybe a strong one, where it had a really sort of nasty plot about some sort of MAGA Trump guy shooting at illegals coming through the US-Mexico border. And that's pretty much the entire movie. And it's sort of like a cat and mouse survival thriller against the migrant and the MAGA person, but it takes the side of the migrant. So take that as you will. Then we've had.
Well, it's a good thing that it takes the side of a migrant, because that's a person you should be sympathizing with. You're not going to side with the racist white bloke. I fucking hope you wouldn't.
Well, like Alf Garnett, some people will twist the message around to fit their own sort of narrative. Many people sort of co-opted what he says, despite them missing the point. You could say that about
very much missing the point.
Purge movies as well. Some people, like to think it's some sort of violent, nihilistic free-for-all that encourages people to kill one another, when it's actually a really nasty and violent film franchise about what happens when people lose their inhibitions.
Well, it's like when people read or watched The Watchmen, and they all thought Rorschach was really cool, which was missing the point by a country mile.
That happens a lot, and I'm sure that happens even within the confines of racist films and comedy that you'll see every now and again. I mean, I'm sorry to say this to the Metropolitan Police. I've got a copy of American History X.
That film wasn't banned or anything. You're not possessing anything illegal.
Well, I'll put it this way. Aside from the prison rape, there are very frequent scenes of racial slurs and racist violence, and some people have used that film to co-opt it for their white nationalist means, which I find quite unsettling.
Missing the point, because his whole point is his character's redemption arc basically was him rejecting that white supremacist neo-Nazi lifestyle, and actually, not being one of them anymore, and actually be, embracing diversity, or just not being a dick to people of other colours. I mean, don't know how best to describe it, but yeah, again, they missed the point.
I think even the BBFC probably missed the point as well, because I got it when it has the 18 certificate on the DVD, but in recent years it's been a 15 downgraded, which I found quite unsettling, because having seen it about maybe twice, it is one of the most graphic 15 films I have ever seen. I don't know how on earth that slipped past the radar.
Well, maybe it's because of the point they're trying to get across. It's not just done there for sheer entertainment. Like I say, I'm not going to repeat the point again because I've already said it. But yeah, I will say at least that film is sort of making a point, and the main character, starts off as this horrible neo-Nazi that you would have seen at Charlottesville in 2017, turns later on into this guy who's actively acting against that. Have you seen Romper Stomper?
I have. Actually, it's NC-17 in the US. Yeah,
I'm
that's
fucking
a pretty
surprised.
nasty film.
It's fucking horrible.
Putting
But the thing is, though, unlike American History X, we don't see the main character actually going through any change. He starts off this despicable Nazi, and he ends up one. It doesn't seem like it. The film's actually trying to move against the sort of making a stance against Nazism. Although you do see him like him and his dickhead friends going around picking all these fights with these Vietnamese kids and everything. And of course, they end up getting their asses fucking handed to them. So maybe there's that to them. Maybe the point is to actually make these Nazis look quite tragic and pathetic, which, of course, they are. And so maybe that was the film's goal. In which case, yeah, okay, they probably succeeded in that way.
I think on many of those types of movies, it's sort of the message can be a little bit on the grey side, really. The one I think that's really a bit more open about this is wrong, you shouldn't do it, it's probably American History X. Out of This Is England and Romper Stomper, or Cuck, which is a movie I saw recently. I interviewed the filmmaker who did that. So yeah, out of the three films, Romper Stomper and This Is England is probably the more grey as far as the morality or themes are concerned. Now, This Is England did get a bit of controversy because of that 18 certificate, because they thought it was going to deny its audience. And I think some councils even threatened to downgrade it to a 15, and it has been played in some sixth forms, maybe year 11s, year 10s, because they thought that the message was vital enough that the 18 may have just been a bit of an overreaction because the kid says cunt and calls people packies and threatens them with knives.
Well, I mean, how old is This Is England again? When was it come out?
2006.
Really?
I wasn't legal to see it, but I remember when it came out.
Well, I didn't see it or anything. I mean, I haven't seen it to this very day. I would have been allowed to see it because I was 21 then. No, but I'm surprised. No, am I surprised? I mean, because obviously, if it had come out under Furman, you could totally understand that because what he was like. But by this point, you'd have thought they might not. But again, I've not seen the film, so I can't really judge it.
I'll put it this way: come in with a strong stomach. It's not as disturbing as American History X, but it's got a lot of moments that will make you uncomfortable because you probably have met people kind of like this. Maybe where you grew up in Gloucestershire. Not saying anything.
I mean, I mentioned it in the last podcast that where I come from was quite a right-wing area. There was a lot of people there who, again, you should say, not particularly well educated and everything, which does tend to make people susceptible to racist thoughts because, well, it's not exactly a secret that racists tend to be quite poorly educated, and well, people with bigoted views of any sort to be poorly educated, which is what made the alt-right quite scary because they held these views, but they actually were educated. That's just bad. That's terrifying. That is.
I think the
But
problem
yeah,
is that a lot of these think tanks, these shadowy organizations that funnel money through like Republican or Tory candidates, are financing these people to say this garbage. I don't think these things come out of a balloon. There's something underneath the cracks that are occurring. Conspiracy theories don't just belong to the right wing. The left wing believes it too.
well, I mean, they're
Anyways,
not. Well, I mean, they're not exactly. The left isn't above conspiracy mongering at times, uh, but they don't tend to dwell on them quite much. And usually, yeah, if a left does say something that sounds a bit conspiratorial, it might actually be more grounded in reality. Not always. One of the guys I used to work with claimed to be a left winger, supported Corbyn, and or as you know, I did. Also believed in conspiracy theories surrounding the moon landing and Building 7, no matter how many times they've been debunked. But that's not here nor there or anything. And we're not talking about. But where were
we were
what we
talking
talking?
about where you grew up in Gloucester with people who are a bit.
Not
I don't know
everyone
if
there.
this
I
is
mean, there are
offensive.
some people there who are a bit more enlightened and everything. And I mean, give these people some credit. They can be tolerant and they want to be, but good grief, you get them talking about Brexit or immigration, and it's just like you walked into, I don't know, you may as be a National Front rally from the 1970s. I fucking swear to God, it's just disturbing. And I also feel a bit ashamed for myself because the amount of times I just didn't confront them on this bigotry when I should have. But then again, they just call you a PC, SJW, and something like that, and fucking hell, it's just cringy. But again, let's not ramble.
I've been called a woke libtard on several occasions, including on online forums and the internet. So I know what it's like to stick out like a sore thumb. I know Kent, Essex, obviously Buckinghamshire. I lived there for a while. And then the times I was in America, I know everyone likes to think California is this sort of liberal paradise in the US, but it's actually the area I
by
live.
American standards.
Yes, exactly. But the area I actually live in is actually Republican leaning. I wasn't never called an N word, but you could always sense that any given minute they were going to somehow make a jab at me based on how I was or how I looked. So that's why I always try to tell people, oh, British, or American, because that's the problem. You can't win with all these people. And even I myself have been guilty of promoting racist ideology. The amount of times I've used to make jabs at Jewish people, Italians, and even East Asian groups for being model minorities at the expense of more poor minorities like blacks and gypsies or Roma people, you'll be surprised. I've even targeted my own people. Um, you know, and yes, if the Met Police wants to arrest me because I said the N word to someone because I didn't like how they were behaving, and I felt self hatred or called someone a towelhead, I've used that word several times. Or
Yeah,
kike.
yeah. You don't actually have to say the actual slur, Mark. We can read between the lines. I
Okay.
mean, you using the N word. I mean, were you feeling a bit like that Chris Rock skit that's quite famous or infamous?
I don't really know that one that well. I think problem with mixed race people is sort of confused identity. For many people, when you're mixed, you have to identify with your minority side. It's why you hear like Obama or Meghan Markle say, I'm black, I'm black. Or in case of Jimmy Mystery from East is East, I'm South Asian or I'm Indian. Um, that's a little difficult for me. So I somehow I grew up feeling like white is better. I still think that, and I wish I didn't. I think
Yeah, that's not some.
society, social conditioning playing on my mind, and in the world of employment and trying to get a loan or dating, you have to appear more whiter than you actually are. Although there are women who fetishize black and brown men just for their penis. Not for anything else. Not even for their brain.
Yeah, well, we've seen a lot of stuff, a lot of videos on the internet regarding stuff like that. Um, but it is true. I think of a lot of people who are, give lack of a better, mixed race, such yourself, who are half black and half white. I have a friend who is not. I'm saying of not using the black friend argument or anything, but I mean, yeah, and of course, but again, I mean, they probably they would be racially coded as black and such would be subject to the racism that black people do. Was a lot of people who are half white and half Asian, like half East Asian, like Chinese or Japanese, or even South Asian, or even Middle Eastern or Persian, you know, that do what's known as and I really don't like using this term, but it's what
Code switching.
passing for white. A good example would probably be Mike Schnoder of Linkin Park or Reiko Aylesworth, who played Michelle in 24. I mean, they're half Japanese, but I mean, obviously they yeah, you look at them and people just think they're of European descent or anything, probably the tan, and as such probably wouldn't be subject to the discrimination and microaggressions that people of Asian descent probably normally would.
No, I'm afraid you're right. The East Asian stuff, well, I've met going to be a little bit more ambiguous, although that doesn't necessarily apply to everyone. I know Maggie Q. I don't know if you've heard of her. I think
I've
she's
heard of her, I don't know much about her.
a bit more open about her East Asian background, mainly through her mother's side. And then in the case of other mixed race people, they managed to actually get away with it, like Andrew Tate and Slash from Guns N' Roses. I
Yeah,
sometimes envy Andrew Tate and Slash because no one actually knows what they are. And some people thought they were white.
that's yeah.
I envy that.
Well, because they probably won't. Yeah, because they wouldn't be subject to the racial discrimination and microaggressions that you've probably received in your lifetime.
Exactly there.
Less likely to get pulled over by the police. Although that's kind of ironic now mentioning that about Andrew Tate.
Now he's in prison in Romania for rape, human trafficking charges. Not having a good time there. But that's beside the point. But yeah, it's not a pretty thing to be. And I'm sorry to sound like a far right lunatic, or even like a hardline black nationalist. Careful what you do with your seed, because society will judge it for you.
Well,
So like,
we are trying to do what we can to stamp out racism and destroy the concept of race as a concept. Because let's face it, it is just a social construct. It's not rooted in biology. There's
no, it is. It is. It's just I'm sort of obliged to kind of get this out of my system because it's not easy for me talking about these things. It's like for you talking about religion. It gets you riled up.
yeah. Well, I've had my own personal things, but to be honest, I mean, I can I could easily just ignore the whole religion thing. It doesn't really affect me. I just kind of choose not to. Whereas I don't think that's an option you really have when it comes to ra- uh, racism and the like. I was sort of thinking because we were going to talk about racism movies, and we are probably going to. I'd say you're going to bring up things like American History X. Do we want to talk about films like Hidden Figures and Mississippi Burning and A Time to Kill, which deal with racism and everything, and obviously are very condemning of racism, but kind of do tend to play the white savior trope?
Yeah, we can more than happy to talk about them. The one that comes to mind is Green Book,
Oh,
which
I've not seen it.
it's a 12A certificate, quite standard in 12A, mainly because of two F words and some racial slurs. But there was that controversy about the themes of the film, making it seem like, oh, the Italian American ultimately learns how to learn to appreciate the black man's talents, even if he is quite ignorant and quite judgmental, but saying, I thought you black people love KFC. And the twist of narrative is that the black person is actually quite dignified and upper class, while the Italian American is quite uncouth and working class. which may mean different things because I know in Britain class is a big issue, but in America race seems to dominate the conversation just a bit more. But take that as you will. But yeah, Hidden Figures.
Well, in I was going to say a country that's founded through colonial settlerism is probably going to have some racist leftovers hanging around. So I mean, yeah, make of that. Yeah, well, I've seen Hidden Figures recently. Quite good. I'm surprised it was only rated PG. I say surprised. I mean, obviously the film doesn't have anything in it that would require more than a PG. But before I watched it, it's like, oh, it's only PG rating. I thought it's going to be like an R/15 rating, as most of these films tend to be, because that's the only way you can get like get into the the horror, the nitty gritty and the horrible stuff of racism, so you can really confront it properly. But no, it's a good film. I liked it.
I mean, my mother, she's the darker one in the family. She likes those films as well. I didn't have the gumption to tell her about the white savior narrative. I just let it be that it was a story about black female empowerment. And, you know, being educated and being a woman in an industry that was predominantly run by men, I'm sure there were some creative liberties taken just to try to appease to a modern generation. But these are very positive messages for young women and women of color. I'll put it that way.
Yeah,
But
it's because they're working in a NASA space program and towards getting them on getting the man on moon and everything. And of course, NASA is stationed, well, as we all know, in Houston, in Texas, and Texas is part of the former Confederate states, which had all the Jim Crow laws. It's just really sort of hard, gobsmacking to think that during this time of great technological innovation and advancements in science, that were the place where it was happening still had these, let's face it, quite barbaric laws and systems in place where they're actually segregating their workforce.
Fortune is another way to control the population and the resources to put in their favor. In all fairness, the reason why racism exists is because one group wants to feel like they have power over another. You don't even have to be white to even believe this. It's one of the reasons why certain countries are run by one religion or one sort of political philosophy, because they haven't got to a point where they can accept sort of diversity of opinion. And the irony about Texas is that they were one of the first states to bring about that sort of Emancipation Proclamation and even allow Juneteenth, which happened, I think, a few days ago.
June 19th.
As a government holiday. Now it's a federal holiday that's been passed since last year. So a bit of an irony there. Galveston, Texas. I have a bit of explaining to do. But yeah, it's a neat little film, standard PG, but it is a PG that's not marketed to children. Yes,
That's
my
true.
friends, they do exist. It's just it used to be in the back of the day. There used to be a lot more PG films that are aimed at adults, even teenagers. Nowadays, PG is more or less a kids rating and all the sort of non-specific demography films that usually relegate to the 12A and 15 categories these days.
Well, that is true. And what I will say, I have seen Hidden Figures. I have not seen Fences, and I have also not seen Hidden Fences.
Oh, that's from that Saturday Night Live sketch. It combined the two titles.
Well,
Well,
it's not
this one.
it. But do you know why they did that joke, though?
I think it was to make a joke about Oscar bait.
No,
I
it
was
wasn't
told.
that. It was at the Oscars. Michael Keaton was making a speech, and he mixed the two titles up. And of course, that did not reflect well because he was just thinking, oh, these two predominantly black films, and he couldn't tell them apart. Even though I say I haven't seen Fences, but from what I've heard about it, that film and Hidden Figures could not be more couldn't be more dissimilar to each other. That's the word, dissimilar.
No, exactly. I mean, Fence is based off a play. It plays much like a play. in a suburban neighborhood that was segregated. So I
I
let
think you're
that one slip.
I think you're breaking up a bit, Mark.
Mr. Man, hello. Mr. Man, can you still hear me?
It's going a bit faint.
I'll keep talking if you need me to, but I'll say to get your point. Racism films, at least the ones I'm aware of, in America, usually tend to be PG-13 sort of level. I think this is a way to try to get the sort of family crowd in, or as many people
That's
as you
better.
can, because if you relegate to R, you kind of lose the audience a bit. And they usually reserve the racism films that are if they're sort of dealing with crime overtly, or it's sort of, a graphic film of sorts, or Spike Lee, who's more or less the king of this sort of thing. Spike Lee is very much revered within black cinema alongside Gordon Parks. I don't know if a lot of his films are very popular in the UK, but the film that comes to mind is Jungle Fever.
Well, I've seen
Black Klansman.
Yeah, I've seen Black Klansman recently. That was a very good film. That was I just find it quite funny when John David Washington's character, is it John David Washington or David John? What the hell is it?
Yeah.
Pardon?
John David Washington, Denzel's son.
Yeah, I know he's Denzel's son. You can tell. That's why he sounds so much like him. Yeah, it was having it was on the phone to David Duke and everything, and David Duke is just making that such a bigoted statement, just showing his own ignorance and saying, "Oh, I can tell you're not a N-word," because every time he's saying N-words, you always go up the end with the "ara" and everything, and of course, Washington's character at the end, after they've done the probe into the KKK, is like saying, "Is "Ara, you sure?" Yeah, and then he just basically calls him a white. There's one that stands out more than anything else in the damn film. I might need to watch it again, actually. There's not much else I can really a huge amount else I can remember other than Adam Driver's doing everything he can to just infiltrate the clan and just trying to act like the biggest shit kicker imaginable. But at least that one was making because it was directed by the black dude Spike Lee. It's of course the African American community more taking charge of a narrative and the struggle against the racism rather than the white savior trope that we mentioned earlier.
No, exactly that. That's one of the reasons why I have a great deal of respect for Spike Lee that I probably don't, let's say, like Norman Jewison, who used to make movies a little like this, and he saw social dramas. And it was sort of milky just a bit, just for the mainstream audience. Although he did do Soldier's Story, which was a PG film, really, enough in the States, despite having frequent uses of the N-word and a lot of references to rape. Take that as you will. I think it was a 15 in the UK, and still is, but Spike Lee's films are, even if you take out the ratings in question, are very much cutthroat. You'd never watch them on a good day. You're always left wondering, you're guilty of your own conscience, and he tends to get a lot of flack for this as well, aside from other allegations that he sort of sexually exploited Rosa Perez, but that's another story. But Black Klansman is interesting. I call it that because the triple K in the title. A 15 certificate, but I would say it's one of the most vulgar 15 films I've ever seen.
Well, I wouldn't go that far. I think it's pretty standard 15 affair, really.
One C word that's used in passing, but the use of the N word and other ethnic and racial slurs combined with the fuck, you would be a little taken aback by it, because in the modern day film you wouldn't expect that kind of language to be used so frequently. But because context
is justified by context, Mark, because it's tackling racism. I mean, again, the main bad guys are members of a KKK. They're bound to be using those words, and to not have them use those words and make it unrealistic, and Lee clearly knew that. I mean, as I was saying, if you want to tackle racism, you have to tackle it head on, and yes, that will require using language that is going to make you feel uncomfortable, and obviously that's going to be taken into account when rating the film.
Absolutely, it's just on my end, I suppose I had to exaggerate for the audience a bit, but in modern day confines, you'd be a bit surprised to hear that kind of language really used quite liberally. Even though it's fine at 15, but it might give some of the more, pardon the expression, woke members of the audience a bit of a pause. And the far right won't see it anyway, because they'll think it's mocking them.
It is.
Now, one film that comes to mind is Gentleman, Guy Ritchie's movie. Now, that one
Not
isn't
seen it.
18 because of language, but it's certainly got some of the most racist language and behavior I've seen in a modern day film in quite a while. Not only the C word is used like 30 times, but you hear you duck eating C word, you Chinaman, and people doing I was like, you.
Well, like I say, I haven't seen it, so I mean, I'd have to watch it before I could really make any comments on it. But I'm probably aware of it. Also, here's a question: have you watched the latest series of Black Mirror, Mark?
I've only seen the Channel 4 versions, like that episode with Bestiality, and Lenora Critchlow is hunted by people with phones. And Daniel Kaluuya was in one episode with cycling.
Right.
Life.
Well, anywho, the latest season was season 6, which is on Netflix. The very final episode does deal quite hardly with racism, because it features an Indian, well, I think it's Indian, well, Indian or Pakistani or Bangladeshi woman, a South Asian woman, anyhow, living in is it London? I think it's London. Of course, the actress playing her is actually Singaporean, and she was in This Is Lady Parts. Yeah, it's just basically, because it's set during the 70s. Yeah, in 1979, and of course, yeah, it just shows you the kind of just stuff they would have to go for on a regular basis, because it turns out one of her freaking co-workers is just a member of a National Front, or at least a supporter of the National Front. And another guy and another main character in the episode is this ultra right-wing Tory who's basically trying to take the National Front's message and just repackage it for the more polite society and everything. Same shit, different paint, which is kind of what the Tories did actually in the 1964 election in a place called Smethwick, I think it was, where the National Front or the far anything had a campaign which said, if you want an N-word for a neighbour, vote Labour. And the Tories just took the same leaflet and same campaign slogan and everything, changed the N-word to coloured, and just repackaged it as in their own marketing campaign. So, yeah. And thankfully, the Tories lost that damn election, although I think they got that constituency. But anyway, I'm probably rambling a bit, but fucking hell, he really does hammer it home.
With all these TV shows that are out, but I just don't know ambition to do so. But that sounds awful. I know Malcolm X actually went to Smethwick to explain Britain's issues with racism compared to the US. Now, that's a different topic altogether. Because I could go on about the differences, but in all fairness, for Americans listening, we've had sort of de facto segregation. We just didn't put it as law. There were businesses back in the day that used to say on job leaflets, no colored people can work here. There's a lot of that overtness. And then Enoch Powell, who I talked to with someone just the other day in his Rivers of Blood speech, a lot of that was happening. And there's still people who praise Enoch Powell as if he's God, just like they praise Nigel Farage as God. I don't know what you do with these people sometimes. It's almost like you have to move, but if you have no money and you don't know anyone, you can't do so. So you're left to fend for yourself against the far-right nutters, go to prison, or commit suicide. That's the option.
It is freaking horrible. I mean, you just hope that as societal attitudes do change, people will move away from this. But I mean, it's been what 60 years since well, all this since the 60s, where this racism was kind of at its forefront. You didn't think we've moved on since then, and of course, I like to think for the most part we have. I speak as a privileged white man, but I mean, these people, they still rear their ugly heads. I mean, they may disguise it. They'll start their sentence with the phrase "I'm not racist," but, and then just say something incredibly racist. I mean, the opposition to the Black Lives Matter movement is just so telling, and it just reflects us. I mean, if they honestly think they're saying that and not being racist, then they need to work on their self-awareness. I don't really know how further to go with it. I mean, I'm said what I'm saying.
Well, my fear is because I already know how Europeans operate. My fear is infighting, or where the majority group or sometimes use a minority group to pit one minority against another. We've seen this a lot with Jews versus Muslims because of Israel and Palestine. We've seen it even with the black community versus the gay community, feminists versus Muslims. I don't know. Or I've even seen in Los Angeles, this is actually quite a big thing with Latin Americans and Hispanics targeting blacks and vice versa, based on, many of the communities are quite poor, and then there's sort of de facto segregated neighborhoods, de facto meaning just by fact, not necessarily by law. And this is what happens when you have two poor people fighting against another. It creates further division because they feel like they can't get ahead, so they have to stab and kill one another just so they can get ahead. It's never a good thing. It's one of the reasons why you sometimes will see Polish people fighting with Arab migrants and stuff. Because yeah.
Yeah, I know. I mean, we've had a lot of immigration to the UK as recently has actually been Eastern European, mostly Poles, but we've had some a lot of Lithuanians as well, and of course, it was quite funny when the far right started hating on them and everything. It's like we're going, oh, send them home, and they're thinking, were you racist? Wait, they're white. How does that work? But it's still xenophobia. But of course, I found a lot of Eastern European countries, they do seem to contain a lot of outdated views. I don't know if just the 50 years of communism or Soviet communism had just stunted their God, this is probably stunted their social development or anything like that. Then again, a lot of these Eastern European countries never had colonial empires, so I mean they probably don't have as much blood on their hands as so much skeletons in their closet regarding racist attitudes. So I mean, again, rambling again, and I don't know where I'm going with it, but it's just food for thought. I mean, if we're going to bring up racism in film, one thing I couldn't help but to mention, it's not the most obvious film, but in Aliens.
We actually mentioned this a few podcasts ago where you had a Jewish lady trying to play a Hispanic.
Yeah, and she went on brown face for it. I mean, it's surprising because I mean I was only 1 year old when Aliens came out, but you tend to think that sort of those sort of attitudes were were long dead by the 80s, but clearly they weren't. They just think they could take some white person and just uh brown them up for lack of a better term, to play a not white person, a person of color. And of course, there's so many various examples of that. I mean, we can also bring up the Apu controversy from The Simpsons.
Oh, easily there. Unfortunately, with animation, there tends to be a bit of an unusual grey area because you can't see who the actors are. Oh, but if you look at their Wikipedias and stuff, you'll certainly know what they look like. Family Guy even had this problem too with Mike Henry, I think is his name, played Cleveland.
Cleveland, yeah.
Black something there, so it's a
Yeah,
bit.
it is.
In all fairness, it's a bit crass, but I didn't pick up on this when I was growing up. I just take it as comedy,
Well, I didn't pick
and
up on
we
it.
are all guilty.
I didn't pick up on it myself. I mean, on Matt Groening's other major show, Futurama, at first looks like it's done better because it's Phil Lamar that voices Hermes, the Jamaican guy, and Lauren Tom, who's who's Asian, who voices Amy, the Asian girl. And of course, on the surface, that does look quite progressivist. Then you find out who voices Amy's dad. It turns out it's Billy West, the same guy who voiced Fry. And of course, he's actually doing much as in the case with what was it, Hank? Who's it who voices Hank? Is it Hank Azaria voices Apu?
Yep, that's
Yeah,
him.
much like with Hank Azaria voicing Apu, they're actually doing the stereotypical accent of a Chinese and an Indian person, like you'd expect from a fucking Jim Davidson skit.
No, it does not look very good in terms of.
Don't get me started on comedian. I say the term loosely. Things like Jim Davidson and Bernard Manning and Roy Chubby Brown, because they are just fucking awful.
Well, unfortunately, I've been guilty of laughing at a bit of Roy Chubby Brown's skits in the same way I've been guilty of listening to some of Dave Chappelle's stuff. I know Dave Chappelle, he's black, but he's got into trouble a bit for making jokes about Chinese people and transgenders. People at Netflix were trying to protest it with signs. So it's a bit of a two-way street, but unfortunately, these are skeletons I have in my closet. I'm more than happy to expose just for my own benefit. I mean, animation in general is a little bit on the shadowy side, so sometimes you'll have Phil Lamar, weirdly enough, actually voiced Samurai Jack, who was supposed to be, I think, Japanese. Samurai Jack.
Well, I mean, yeah, he would be expected to be supposed to be Japanese, yes.
And yeah, I know anime in general, most of the voice talent, at least for the English market, generally tends to be white. You never see sort of East Asian anime voice talent unless it's the original versions. So sometimes it can be a little bit off-putting, but you have to sort of let it pass. I think anime has that weird element of it is Japanese. Why do the characters all have blonde hair and blue eyes? I'm like, I'm sure you probably wondered this too.
I mean, I've thought about. I've only just started thinking like, oh yeah, the characters are Japanese, but they're not being voiced by white people. But then again, I don't think I don't think it's quite as egregious as the previous ones. Again, I say this as a fucking white person, because I mean, well, they're not. At least they're not doing the accent or anything, which is, I think, the most probably the most important element. Where the fuck was?
No, it's more overt, is how I'll put it that way.
Although I did, the only problem I had with the accents in the English dubs of anime is like, okay, it's set in Japan. The voice actors are British. Why are they doing American accents? Did not get that, but that's neither here nor there right now.
I usually get used to it because this sounds kind of easier. I'm a bit
You're
of
breaking up a bit.
just sort of easy,
Mark, you're breaking up a
a
bit.
bit of a sucker. Oh, I am.
Yeah, you're fading
Hello,
out.
can you hear me?
Yeah, you can hear. Yeah, that's fine now. But you just started got a bit of static and crackling and everything.
Because the Wi-Fi can do that every now and again, but it's usually infrequent. But I usually appreciate the sort of cheesy dubs that you get on sort of Japanese cartoons. They often make me laugh, but that's beside the point, anyways. As far as films that were banned because of racism are concerned, or at least TV and stuff, the one I can think of, at least from TV, is Jonah from Tonga. Oh dear. Australian TV show. You aired on BBC Two or 3, I believe. And it depicts Chris Lilly, who's a well-known sort of veteran, sort of Australian comedy circuit, sort of darkening up and trying to be Pacific Islander or Polynesian. So I did like this, and that chocolate said, oh, it was a bit weird. I'll put it that way. It's not like Taika Waititi played Hitler from Jojo Rabbit. It was a little bit unusual. Like Little Britain. I mean, everyone now hates Little Britain, but I'm a little bit impartial to it.
Well, there was a yeah, because they were wearing blackface, and of course that's just that isn't cool. I don't care how you dress up, that's not cool, and that's probably why a lot of streaming services did take them down after during the Black Lives Matter protests of 2020, which to be as same way they took down things like Uncle Ben and is it Aunt Jemima's pancake syrup?
Yep, they called it the Pearl Brewing Company, and then
which to
Uncle
be
Ben
fair,
calls Ben's the original.
yeah, which to be fair, they should have done. I mean, I don't know if you've seen this film called CSA Confederate States of America.
Oh, I have. One of Tartan's best films. That's a 12A, but it's really fucked up 12, I'll tell you that.
Yeah, it does. Again, it is all due to hammer home a point, though. And while it's not exactly historically accurate or likely for many reasons that we can't really get into and everything, at the end they did bring up Uncle Ben's and Aunt Jemima's because, I mean, they're saying that these outdated stereotypes were just still being used that you just wouldn't expect from in the 21st century. You just expect it from back in the days of Whistling Dixie, and it wasn't okay back then either. Because I mean, I was about to start going into the old timey cartoons I used to watch growing up, and just how much racism was in there. I mean, I mentioned Dumbo. Everyone's mentioned Dumbo and the Crows. There's also the Native Americans in Peter Pan and that infamous song. I'm certain you know what I'm talking about.
Yes, I do. Although that was one I was seeing a lot growing up. Maybe possibly because of that element.
Well, possibly. I mean, I also, as a kid, watched a lot of Tex Avery cartoons, which I found out my gran had a load on VHS, and we ended up taking them home and watched them. And yeah, they were quite funny. I mean, the whole Screwy Skrill cartoons are just manic in a way that just aren't done today. But oh boy, there are some severely outdated tropes there. I mean, like use of blackface and everything, which oh boy, I mean, as a kid growing up, I didn't actually realize that, but I was just watching them now, and it's just oh man, disturbs me that I actually watched that. And obviously, these were released far before I was born, but still.
I mean, you grew up in an era that was maybe a little bit more flexible with that sort of material. I mean, Song of the South, they even re-released it in the US in the mid-'80s, from what I was told. And that's a movie that has quite a legacy. You can't even find it on many channels anymore as a result of the heavy ethnic stereotyping.
Probably for the best.
I never saw it, but my mother has. And unfortunately for her, she didn't even pick up on the ethnic stereotyping because she thought that the lead character being black, that was a step forward, even though
it probably was back then.
Hidden underneath the surface. But that can pose as a problem every now and again, that sometimes you'll get ethnic minority casts at the front, but are they really sort of promoting a positive depiction of them? Sometimes it can be used as a sort of vehicle for ethnic stereotyping. I mean, that's what happened with Amos and Andy, who are actually black fellas, who actually donned blackface to make a sort of laughing point at the audience. In the same way, you could say on the flip side, Jewish man Warren Mitchell put on a mustache and cut his hair off to be off guard. It's fucking black. He's coming right here to take our jobs.
Which again, he was meant to be satirizing people like that, but the problem is that people who are having a piss take out of him didn't realize a part of the joke and actually thought it was great. And he actually said he had to confront someone over this because they came up to him and said said, "Oh, brilliant, mate. Oh, I totally agree with what you're saying." And he just said, "You fucking idiot. I'm specifically taking a piss out of your ilk." That's the abridged version of it, anyway. Yeah, I mean, two other films that have really come into mind with discussing racism, two very old films, are, of course, Gone with the Wind, and, of course, far more egregiously, A Birth of a Nation.
Birth of a Nation is a very unusual one because I was told that it got a U certificate initially, but then they upgraded to 15. That's a big leap. I think that's unheard of. But I'm not surprised as to why. I could be
I
wrong
didn't.
on this, but
I mean, well, I mean, I don't. I'm just looking it up on the BBFC website right now. I mean, doesn't. I'm just yeah, like I say, just trying to look it up right now, but I'm doing a really bad job of it. I mean, it may have been a U when it first came out, but again, 1950, 15, it may. Yeah, they may have just felt, oh yeah, just fine, just fine. Uh,
I mean, they may
Here we
have
go.
had to censor a few things, but they probably left it almost intact. But,
Oh yeah, it
it's
was.
got a legacy.
It was at the cinema in 1950, 1931, and 1952. It got away with U ratings, and ever since it's been released on home video from 94, 2000, 2005, yeah, 15. That is a big jump. But then again, considering what the film's about, I'm really not surprised. I mean, it was controversial when it came out for its blatant racism. A lot of African Americans, civil rights groups did protest the movie at the cinemas, and you know, don't really don't really blame them, and it's not in any way surprising.
I wouldn't blame them either. I mean, I've never seen it. That's a film I'm a bit too cautious to even go see. And this is coming from someone who's seen crazy shit like that Eastern European film in Human Centipede 2 and Clockwork Orange. But Birth of a Nation is making a little step too far, even for even me.
Well, I mean,
And then
it's yeah.
Gone with the Wind, that's actually still popular. Even the woman who made Censor has it on her profile photo. I heard a cat and then Clark Gable and Maureen O'Hara. It's like a dual photo, but aside from that, it's most people just like to think of it as sort of an epic film, a relic of its time, but you get a lot more people questioning the film's merits nowadays. And as well, the implied sexual assault of Scarlett's, the Countess Scarlett.
Well,
So
there is
yeah,
going
it's
to
a
be
lot of
well,
baggage.
yeah, there is going to be that. Also, it's considered the first movie to ever contain a swear word, even though if it isn't the modest swear word imaginable. But well, what was I going to go with this? Yeah, I think it's one of those films that like to romanticize the antebellum South of the USA, and they sort of like propagates that lost cause of the South narrative that the neo Confederates like to propagate, which is such a fucking uh, just such a lie and everything. I mean, it's like that stab in the back legend that the Germans embraced after World War Two, or after World War One, even, or hell, even it's. I think of the lost cause of the South myth just like Holocaust denial. It's just some racist revisionist of history that's completely bollocks. They're trying to say, oh, the South was fighting for states' rights. Yeah, states' rights to what?
Exactly. You even hear that argument even to this day with Republicans fighting in Congress saying, we need to promote states' rights for abortion so you can ban it. So yeah, I don't know what to do with these people sometimes. Why don't we just go out as violent group military mercenaries and shoot the bastards?
Yeah, you broke up. I didn't quite
If they
catch
want
all that.
to put me on a, I'm actually glad that it broke up on that because they would have put me on a terrorism watch list for saying we should kill these bastards for
Well, they
promoting right-wing
probably shouldn't say.
ideas.
Yeah, I think we should just clarify we're not actually advocating violence towards these people or towards anyone. Yes, we're just saying that these people piss us off quite a bit, which can make us delve into those sort of thoughts, but we do have no intention to act upon them.
Exactly, because when you have one extreme sort of hanging for one another group turns extreme to try and counteract that. That's why you saw the Black Panther movement in the 60s, because they dealt with so much shit. They had to be just as radical as them to prove their point. You could even say that's how a lot of these sort of groups like ISIS and Al Qaeda sort of sprung up as a result of years of intervention between Russia and the US because of the Jihadis in Afghanistan, and then also 9/11 happened. They felt they were under threat. So now you have governments and white nationalists fighting against Islamic extremists because they feel like they're disenfranchised. It's a vicious cycle. Violence begets violence. It's why you even see now even Israeli Jews being radicalized to where any Arab is a threat, and you better kill them and occupy their lands.
Well, yeah.
I'll put it this way: disenfranchisement builds extremism, and extremism builds violence. Violence begets violence.
Yep.
Enough said. Take it as you will.
Well, I mean, yeah, can pretty much take that as a. I do want to. Yeah, I mean, you are right. That is. I mean, where's the lie there and everything? That is very right. I was wondering because we could probably talk if we're talking about racism, we could probably talk about some racist tropes in media, such as the most famous one. If you're if you're watching a horror movie and there's only one black guy in it, well, they're gonna kill them off.
Oh, that is true. That's actually the joke in a scary movie and a few others. There's a movie coming out around late August that deals with that. I've never really picked up on that, unfortunately, because I see a lot of horror films growing up, but it doesn't look good for that perspective, really. There will be sometimes some token heroes, but they're few and far between, really. I actually can't think of any sort of heroes that try to make it out of it, except for Night of the Living Dead, which was a metaphor for racism, even if it was masked as a horror film about zombies. One of the first horror films about zombies. And he died because he was linked as being one of them. And there's a spoiler alert, but most people have probably seen it by now. So that's the one that comes into my mind. Oh, I'll forget this. I know people like the film.
You're cutting out a bit, Mark.
But has anyone ever...
Again, Mark, you're cutting out.
I know a lot of people like to go about... I know a lot of people like going about Get Out. But has the people upstairs...
Yeah.
Well, that was one of the first horror films that there was. And that was a sort of twist of that character. Oh. Don't worry about it. I'll try to edit it all together. If it's the Wi-Fi's fault, let me just try to tell one of these things. I guess I do. Rob?
Yeah?
You are. Yeah, it should be back up. It happens in this house. Like every 2 years. But I was going back with other people up the stairs, which is Wes Craven. Now that sort of defeated some of those racist tropes and try to show what it's like as a black person, to where you have to sort of go to someone's house so you can just put food on the table and avoid being evicted. So those are some hard truths. I think that I have respect for that film. I don't necessarily have for, let's say, Conjuring or Exorcist. Take that as you will. As far as films that have been banned for racist content, hate crime is one that comes to mind. That was a very recent one.
That is
And then
quite recent.
terrorist killers, released as an Rappers, which was like a video compilation, kind of like a bit of a Jackass Dirty Sanchez thing, but showing all these horrible violent situations and saying, look at all these stuff, whoa, it was quite exploitative. So those are the two ones that come to my mind. Have you seen Hate Crime? Because I actually have, but I was in America at the time.
I haven't seen it. No.
Well, um, we're not encouraging anyone to break the law here, or maybe we are, but yeah, it's a nasty 70-minute long home invasion movie with explicit scenes of anti-Semitism, rape, and about an hour and 10 minutes. And even though there was a scene at the end which involved the many instances of anti-Semitism that have been occurring since 2015, that still was not given an exemption enough to get the film from being unbanned. They still banned, which reminds me, if that got banned, I'm sure Funny Games and Man by Star would get banned as well. Because that was a movie that just pretty much was nothing but sadism and torture, or for the eyes of a serial killer or rapist.
I don't think I've seen many of his films, but you know, they may ban it. So I mean, I don't think they should. I don't really like when they ban films for whatever reason. It's just not a. Don't think it sends a good precedent. What the hell was I gonna? Hey, have you watched many Michael Bay films?
The first Transformers and Pain and Gain, I like that one.
Oh, that was okay. Because he tends to deal with a lot of racist stereotypes in his films, to the extent that his films are just like almost just renowned for just being racist. I mean, in the second Transformers films, there's these two characters called Skids and Mudflap, and they are, and just the way they're basically portrayed as the way they talk and everything is, yeah, it's very much a stereotype of African American based on stereotypes of African Americans and everything. So it's like Michael Bay, not cool, and it's not exactly and it's not like he stops there. I mean, most of his films. I mean, the second Bad Boys his film, and even in Armageddon, which is about all his films, involve like black or Asian people being portrayed in a completely stereotypical manner, and it's really, really not a good look. I could have probably elaborated on a bit more, but just something I couldn't, just felt warranted mentioning.
No, but now that I'm thinking about it, yeah, you're probably right. That's the problem. We don't pick up on these sort of things when you initially see it, but I guess they're on a more sort of woke era things, which I know is controversial in its own right. People seeing things that the other ones didn't. I mean, Adam Sandler is guilty of those stereotypes about Chinese people, or South Asians, or Jews, Arabs. You know, that's the Zohan comes to mind. Then I pronounce who Chuck and Larry had Rob Schneider, who is partially Filipino, but he does the most overt East Asian stereotype, squinting his eyes and saying, "You better stop that." And then
that is, I can't believe it. How recently these cannot believe how recently these movies came out. It's just, oh my god, how the hell do you think it was okay to make jokes like that? I mean, in the 21st century, it is just fucking mind-boggling.
You know, one of these things too. The problem is we don't notice them initially unless the Guardian or Socialist Worker or what's that one? Quartz, and now this that we need to question our film choices that we've seen in the past. So when subjects like this sort of come up, I often say I lose the battle here, because Here's the thing I've noticed over the years as a mixed race person. It's very difficult to police people's thoughts. Trevor Phillips agrees with me on this assessment. He's an equality commissioner, but now is kind of a bit of a closet right-wing speaker of sorts, but that's another story.
Yeah, I think I
Telling
recognize the
people
name.
that racism is wrong, especially now with the debate over woke versus unwoke, you're getting hot water. You might even get stabbed. So I will always bring it up whenever I can, but usually to people who I think won't try to kill me, at least with a knife. If they had a gun and they blew my brains out, I'd be more than happy to. But that's another story. But yeah, very difficult to police people's thoughts. Very difficult to try and change them to where I say I don't even bother. That's why I'm a loner. I don't talk to people as much because I feel like I
Well,
already know how they're going to think.
I don't
So
think you should be expected to try and change people's thoughts. I mean, you nor anyone else should really have to argue their humanity and everything. If someone's racist, then they're just a cunt. I mean, it is not. That's not open to debate. That's why you just don't allow bigots a platform. That's why if someone like Richard Spencer wants a speaking engagement, you do not let them have it, and people like them should be kicked off Twitter. But of course, Elon Musk is now not doing anything. And of course, I don't.
he's being fought by. Go on.
I was just basically talking about the whole concept of uh, well, just marginalized groups should not have to argue their debate their argue their humanity or anything. And to be honest, it's like true what they say. It's not their job to educate you in why someone who's privileged, such as myself, um, not their job to educate them as to why what they're doing is problematic or hurtful in some way. I mean, and of course, it's not like a lot of these racists care that it's freaking problematic or hurtful anyway. They probably, in fact, they probably revel in that shit. It's not like they're a freaking. It's not like they're capable of just stepping back, having a look at themselves, and doing that whole Dave Mitchell meme of "Are we the baddies?" Which does remind me, of course, I hear all these ex-Nazis saying how they got themselves out of the Nazi movement and stopped being white supremacists, and you're thinking, yeah, okay, but ultimately better late than never. But like, really, it took you all that to realize Nazis are the bad guys? I mean, we just watched Indiana Jones and played Wolfenstein, and we got it from there. But you know, you always whatever works for you, I guess.
Well, depends on how you report up. A lot of white nationalist types grew up in broke households and neighborhoods. They probably didn't get a strong level of education. Well, some of them have. I mean, Richard Spencer seems like he's quite bright, but for the wrong reasons.
Well,
Ben
we did
Shapiro is
mention
another.
we did
Or
mention the alt right, unfortunately, actually are educated, unlike most racist people.
exactly, and I think one of the bigger problems is that when you've got people like that wearing a suit and a tie, they sound like they're dignified. They're like, oh, he's smart, he's a professional. Well, are they? Which leads, to people like Nigel Farage and Nick Griffin and all these types who are very popular, especially in Kent. I could go on about Kent. It's more right wing than Gloucestershire, I'll tell you that. But yeah, it's not very a pretty sight to be because it makes it seem like it's normalised. And they all seem to pit left wingers as being these sort of commie, hippie, out of touch, middle class trust fund kids. And as left
They always
wingers,
do
we
that
are
one.
guilty of losing. Oh yes, of course. Well, I think part of the problem is that us lefties have been guilty of abandoning sort of the working class vote because we would have won a lot of elections by now worldwide if we somehow tried to find a way to get these right wing people thinking that is the problem. And that seems to be the one big thing that's holding us up. Because you could talk to some of these neo Nazi types right now and they'll say, I voted Tory but I don't like how they're handling the economy. I don't like the inflation.
That's what
So it
happens when
seems
you
to me
get.
on economic issues, when the vote vote.
That's what happens when you vote the bloody Tory in. But yeah, you are right. I mean, they were saying like, I mean, Bernie would have had a better chance of winning the 2016 election than Hillary, and I do I do agree with that. I mean, of course, back a lot of people might point out our 2019 election with Corbyn being Corbyn's left wing populism going down the tubes, but again, that's more related to Brexit. Yeah, we're going to
Because he was
probably
a
get.
bit undecided on that.
He didn't know where he stood on Brexit, so of course, all he lost a lot of our ardent Remainers who went on to be onto the smaller parties, whereas of course all the Brexiters just piled behind Boris and the Tories. And even though he got more or less the same number of votes as Theresa did in 2017, he managed to get himself the 50-seat majority. But you know, I mean, life is one. Life is what it is. And the Tories are standing in the polls now. I don't think they're going to win the next election. So I mean, it's only a matter of time, even if it is get Labour under a hack like Starmer. But probably getting a bit rambly now. I was going to ask, have you seen the film Dear White People?
I have the amount of backlash it got from when it was released on Netflix was massive. Actually, not Netflix, the film in question, then the TV series.
It's on Netflix.
Everyone I know hates that thing.
I quite like the film and I like the TV series. I mean, granted, I mean, being the privileged white person that I am, I of course can't actually. I don't suppose I can relate to it, but I still listen to the messages being put forth, just like with Get Out as well, which of course makes you realize, which shows you the casual racism thrown around. Not, and of course, there isn't always some uh, knuckle dragging football hooligan or some white trash in bohunky shit kickersville in America who can't string two words together, like Michael Rooker's character in Mississippi Burning. No, it does come from these middle class liberals as well, who just managed to dress up. And sure, they may say, I would have voted for Obama a third time. But yeah, that's just more, it's more about them just trying to feel good about themselves rather than actually tackling the problem that is racism.
I'm afraid that can be said about even a lot of people who seem well intentioned, but they're not so much really. Yes. Yeah, like all along, those people like to go on Christian missionaries to Africa. I'm sure some of those people are probably doing it for a photo op. They may not necessarily be passionate about helping out the poor and disenfranchised during famine. And on the flip side, yeah, because Get Out deals with interracial relationships. And I've been in a few myself. Thankfully, none of the relationships I've been in involved women being obsessed about penis size or some sort of ethnic trait that may be a bit more evident about me. But I do have this suspicion that if a white woman likes me, it's probably because she wants to see my size. But that maybe that's just in my head. I've sometimes exploited it to my own advantage. You know, saying even to women who have been interested in me in the past, saying, "I will corrupt you with my foreign cock." So Get Out is a bit of a weird one. That movie kind of turns me on, but it also disturbs me and makes me laugh. So
Wait, what
don't
movie was
don't
that
talk about
again?
it in the detail. It was Get Out
Oh, right. I don't remember
and
him
Jungle
saying.
Fever. That's another one.
I don't remember him saying that in Get Out, but then again, I don't. But then again, yeah. I
Well,
don't remember. I don't.
I'll
I only
put
see it once, but I couldn't really say for sure. But I mean,
I'll put it this way. Uh, Here's a weird perspective I heard on Get Out. Some people have used it as a way to say you should never date interracial, you should never date outside your race, because this is what they think of you. There have been some of the more sort of militant members of the black community, so like NBPP and that sort of these groups, who have used it as a vehicle to warn brothers, don't date white bitches or that sort of thing. At least that's what I heard from the distance. So it could go both ways, really. I mean, what I saw, I thought maybe I shouldn't be trying to date a white woman myself.
Well, I mean, I don't think you should take. I don't know if you really should take that message away from it. Oh, I mean, but you take what it's not up to me to tell you what kind of message you take away from it. And I would hope you wouldn't take a message away from it, because obviously one thing we'd want to do is encourage interracial relations, because that can, well, at least in theory, could probably help to do change societal attitudes to do away with racism. But then again, it won't really change the system that upholds for white supremacy. So I mean, I don't know. It's food
No,
for
but
thought,
you're
I
right,
guess.
because on the flip side, it applies on men to some level, because unfortunately, there's a stereotype around that. A lot of sort of white men who are not very well endowed or successful will sometimes go to East Asia to get a wife. That whole "me so horny" stereotype, which I don't know if that ties with racism, but there are many films
No,
that
it
sort of
is.
exploit this trope
No, it's
for
very, it is very
pornographic or
racist.
comedic gain.
Yeah, it is very racist. I mean, there's no doubt about it. Anytime you're like engaging in use of stereotypes and everything, or trying to basically uh, creating some sort of microaggression where you're just making uh, possibly is the innocent sounding but ultimately very bigoted comments towards someone, is, well, yeah, just racist. There's no two ways around that. Another film which has cropped up to my mind. Have you seen it? Gran Torino.
It's one of my all-time
Pardon?
favorite films, by the way.
Is it?
One of my all-time favorite films.
Yeah, I mean, it is quite good. I've only seen it once, but it came out in 2008, and I just could not believe the flippancy in which Clint Eastwood's character just throws around these racial slurs. And I know it's not technically meant to be siding with his character, and it's part of his arc is just learning not to be a racist, but it's like, yeah, don't know anything. Although apparently Clint Eastwood did do a lot of research into the who is it? The Han family, who he ends up befriending, and into their culture and everything, or at least according to a Wikipedia page. I think, but yeah, it doesn't change the fact his character is a racist old dickbag, and it also almost on the surface seems like a glorification of him being a racist old dickbag. Just like this old granddad who kind of enjoys the humor of Bernard Manning, Roy Chubby Brown, and Jim Davidson.
Oh, absolutely. Oh, oh,
Speaking of
well,
those, and speaking of,
unfortunately,
and just want to say, speaking of those three comedians, uh, you know how I've said I've always been a huge fan of Rick Mail.
yes.
Well, when him and Aid Edmondson and many of their other co-workers started out in the, well, maybe late 70s, but basically early 80s, in what was known as the alternative comedy boom, it was what it was doing was being a reaction or a counteract against those kind of comedians, the racist comedy of like Jim Davidson and the like. And so yeah, they were basically giving it just a middle finger from middle finger away from all those racist working man clubs comedians like Bernard Manning, and of course, yeah. So props to them to that. And well, look who's comedy's aged better. You can watch Bottom now, 30 years later, and it's still funny as absolute fuck. I wouldn't watch a freaking Jim Davidson skit, cunt. And no, that's rambling again. What do you want to say?
Um, well, Gran Torino, I often have to feel guilty about liking that movie, mainly because it does have that scene where he's calling people spooks, patties, and God knows what, and pointing the gun at them as he tries to rescue Hmong, I think Hmong lady from almost being sexually assaulted. So that seems quite questionable, as well as several others, calling them fish heads and all that. It's almost like hearing your granddad speak when he's had a few pints.
Yeah, that's what I
It
was
does
referring
make
to.
me feel it makes me feel like I have to enjoy this because you'll survive in sort of right-wing society, and I've been in right-wing society for a long time now. I've never lived in an area where it's been Labour or Democrat, ashamedly, but take that as you will. But I could go on about Bottom and Rick Mile, but I'll try to keep it off on stopping about Drop Dead Fred, which is the one I'm quite familiar with. But that's not really a film about racism. That's more just mental illness, really.
Well, yeah. Plus, of course, it's not Rick Nell's best work anyway. But yeah, he's yeah, but him and Aiden and their like were basically given the middle finger to the likes of Bernard Manning and Jim Davidson. So as I've just repeated myself now, but it's always something to bear in mind. So it's not like back then there weren't people who just called out these racist comics and said, "You're a bunch of dicks and your jokes aren't funny." I know it's true that racist jokes aren't funny. I mean, anyone when you think it is, anyone thinks it is, it's just a cunt and he's just a slap. Well, don't do that though.
I feel about Spike Milligan dressing up as an Indian person.
Oh god, more of that. Well, red. Well, it would be red face now. That's probably not a cool thing to say. Yeah, sounds like red face. If not, what we could refer to as cultural appropriation.
I mean, Jamiroquai is even accused of it too, and I love Jamiroquai, but he's been accused of using Native American headpieces for his shows and just perpetuating the stereotype of some sort of soul brother because he does sound like a black person when he sings.
Well, that's kind of yeah. I think that's kind of the thing, really. I mean, there's one thing. I mean, if he actually understood the culture and started talking about it quite more intrinsically and more respectfully, that could be known as cultural appreciation. But of course, it's not. It's more appropriation. I don't know much about Jamiroquai other than his song for Deeper Underground, which he did for the Godzilla movie '98, which I'll say is a fucking good song. I absolutely love it. But yeah, I mean, it's not just like, and of course, it is quite intersectional as well because both Aquafina and a YouTuber Lily Singh, who are East Asian and Indian respectively, have been accused of a cultural appropriation for adopting AAVE, African American Vernacular English, or what is more colloquially known as the Blaccent. So it's so I mean it goes all ways and everything.
Well, Tim Westwood is really guilty of that sort of thing.
That's who
I'm
Ali
sure
G
you've
was
heard Tim.
parodying.
I didn't pick up actually for a long time before Borat came along. That Ali G was a real Arab person. I didn't know he was some sort of comic creation.
Well, Ali G is
Like
yeah.
Well, I mean, this was when I was a kid. I thought
Well, fair enough.
he was a real person. He was some sort of Arab or Muslim guy trying to talk street. That's what I thought for a long time. It's
Well,
like Bo Selector, which I actually like. I know you're not supposed to like it because of the Craig David. Gonna be fine. I mean, I'm like Bo Selector. I thought, oh, Lee Francis or Evan Mary and Craig David. I thought that was some sort of real thing or just a funny joke. It wasn't supposed to be racist.
well, I mean, I don't think Bo Selector's aged very well, and it wasn't. It was, I suppose, I found it somewhat funny back then, but yeah, it was pretty lowbrow humor, and I did think it pandered to probably not the lowest common denominator, but if not the lowest common denominator, then the second to lowest or third to lowest. It was yeah, it wasn't exactly mocking the racist attitudes or anything. It's probably not quite as bad as the stuff by Dapper Laughs, but yeah, it's not something you should be too proud of liking.
Should I be banned from Tropic Thunder as well?
What
Because
did you
that's a
say?
movie that I don't always think. Tropic Thunder.
I mean, obviously, Robert Downey Jr.'s that's kind of like a bit of a layer to that one because Robert Downey Jr. isn't exactly blacked up. He's basically playing a white Australian who was blacked up. So it's like a bit of a dissociation. I think Tropic Thunder is more problematic for its use of the R slur.
Well, I've heard some people question the whole Simple Jack scene where he's like, which
That's what we meant. Yeah.
I kind of lose this battle here, I'm afraid, because unfortunately I found that stuff funny. I feel
think
like
a lot of us
I'm
found
a
it funny.
closet right-winger.
I think a lot of us found it funny back in 2008, but it's only after that movie came out that R word is now considered a problematic slur, and they realized, yeah, it's not actually cool to use it. And on retrospect, yeah, they're right. It's very ableist. So, well,
Family Guy had an entire episode where they use that word quite freely.
That was
Peter
before
tries to.
Yeah, that was a few years earlier.
Oh yeah, because I had it on DVD. I was the first 15 certificate animation I owned on DVD. It's like from Ghost in the Shell, and I thought, oh, how naughty of me, because I was 13. But yeah, nothing about. I thought, yeah, that's a bit on the nose. But yeah, I would have to be like Lawrence Fox in many ways, turn some sort of right-wing idiot because I found a lot of this stuff funny. That's it. I divorced from the left. I'm a hypocrite. Bye, world.
Oh, don't do a freaking Dave Rubin and say why I left the left. I can tolerate a lot from you, Mark, but if you do that, we're out.
Fat chance. That was me tricking the audience. Got you there, didn't I? You right-wing bastard. Well, it looks like I might have to cut this one short. I think we might have stepped above a station, but I'm very grateful for this podcast, and hope to hear from you soon.
Okay, then. But I will just sign off and say, I'm a PC woke SJW for life. And I'm doing the old fist of solidarity thing there. And as I'm certain, you are as well, Mark.
Yep, I'm a woke libtard, half-breed idiot who probably watches too much scenes of Paul Bettany whipping himself because it disturbed him as a kid or a teenager speaking.
You can have that out with your therapist, okay? I'm not talking about. I'm not going to dive into that. All right. And thanks for having me on again, Mark. Nice talking to you again. And we went a bit longer than. Was it longer than last one? I don't know. But anyway, yeah. Signing out.
Signing out.